The gavel felt less like wood and more like a shard of ice in Judge Thompson's hand. He savored its weight, the solid finality of it. He looked down from the bench, his gaze falling on the woman standing before him. She was unnervingly still, her posture a silent rebuke to the chaos he was used to. He didn't see a person, but a symbol of what he felt was eroding his world. He saw a defiance he read in her calm expression, an arrogance he imagined in the steady beat of her pulse. He leaned into the microphone, his voice a low, condescending drawl meant to strip away whatever composure she had left. Given the severity of the charges, he began, and your blatant disregard for the decorum of this institution. I see no evidence of remorse. None. What I see is a defiance that poisons the very well of justice. Therefore, I am finding it necessary to make an example of you. I am imposing the maximum possible sentence. Section 1. The setting of the trap to understand the profound, world-altering quiet that was about to swallow Judge Thompson whole, we have to rewind just 30 minutes. It was the end of a long, grueling Tuesday at the county courthouse. The air was thick with the smell of old paper, cheap coffee, and the lingering ghosts of 100 dramas. On the bench sat Judge Howard Thompson, a man who seemed carved from the oak of a bygone era. For 30 years, he'd been a fixture here, known for his tough-on-crime stance. He saw himself as a guardian of order in a world slipping into chaos. But whispers followed him, whispers of inconsistency, of certain defendants getting the sharp end of his gavel far more often than others. He dismissed it all as the grumblings of the guilty. In his mind, justice wasn't just blind, it was supposed to be severe. Observing from the back of the gallery was Keisha Hayes. To a casual observer, she was just another well-dressed woman in a courtroom. Her suit was professional, her demeanor a study in controlled observation. Her eyes missed nothing. But Keisha wasn't a casual observer. She was the newly appointed lead prosecutor for the Special Prosecutions Division. More than that, she was the architect of a new, and deeply controversial, program, the Sentencing Review Initiative. It was a program born from mountains of data showing profound racial and economic disparities in sentencing, designed to take a second look at sentences handed down in this very courthouse. Her presence today wasn't official, it was reconnaissance. She was a ghost in the machine, gathering intelligence. The final hearing of the day concluded. Court is adjourned on this matter, Judge Thompson grumbled, eager to retreat to his chambers. Next case on the docket, the bailiff called out, his voice weary. The State vs. Shanice Williams, docket number 7-3-2-4-9, charge of failure to appear. A moment of confusion. The public defender, a young man named Ben Carter, looked up, startled. Your Honor, my client was delayed. She's on her way, she called just 10 minutes ago, there was an issue with the bus line. Judge Thompson's eyes narrowed. His frustration had found a target. An issue with the bus line, Mr. Carter. Is that the newfangled excuse for a blatant lack of respect for this court's time? It was then that the judge's gaze swept the room and landed on Keisha Hayes. She had stepped out from behind a pillar to get a clearer view, her curiosity piqued. She stood alone, a black woman in a professional suit, waiting. And in Judge Thompson's biased, exhausted mind, a series of assumptions clicked into place with the certainty of a faulty lock. He saw a defendant who had finally arrived. He saw the Shanice Williams from the case file. He didn't see a top lawyer. He saw what he expected to see. Ah, the judge declared with a smirk. It seems a mess. Williams has decided to grace us with her presence after all. Approached the bench. The bailiff looked confused. He knew most of the regular prosecutors. The public defender was frowning, knowing the woman the judge was addressing wasn't his client. But Judge Thompson was on a roll, the conductor of his own orchestra, and he wouldn't be questioned. Before a single word of correction could be uttered, he had fixed his stare on Keisha and begun his descent. Keisha, for her part, simply stood her ground. She understood exactly what was happening. And she made a split-second decision, to let it happen. She was about to get a demonstration more vivid than she could have ever imagined. Section 2, the judge's monologue. Judge Thompson leaned back, a king surveying his domain. He peered down at Keisha Hayes, now standing where countless defendants had stood. The public defender, Mr. Carter, tried to interject, "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is a case of mistaken silence, Mr. Carter." Thompson's voice cracked like a whip. "Your client is here, and she will hear what I have to say." He turned his full attention back to Keisha. "Ms. Williams," he began, loading the name with disdain. "I have your file in front of me. And it tells a story I've read 1,000 times. A series of missed opportunities, poor choices, and a fundamental lack of personal responsibility." He picked up the file but didn't open it. He didn't need to. He'd already written the script in his head. It starts small. A failure to appear. It seems like nothing to you, I'm sure. But what it really is a thread. You pull on that thread, and the whole fabric of an orderly society begins to unravel. It is an act of supreme arrogance. A statement that the rules that bind the rest of us simply do not apply to you. Keisha remained perfectly still. Her infuriating calm was gasoline on the fire of his prejudice. He'd expected cowering, or maybe an outburst. He got poise. He read it as insolence. "Look at you," he continued, gesturing with an open palm. "Standing there as if this is all some grand bore. This is the problem with your generation. No respect for institutions. No respect for authority. You walk through life with a chip on your shoulder, believing you are a victim of a system you refuse to even participate in correctly." This wasn't about Shanice Williams anymore. It was a sermon he had been polishing for years, and this silent, composed black woman was the perfect target for his righteous indignation. "I've spent 3 decades on this bench," he declared, his voice rising. "I've seen true remorse, and I've seen crocodile tears. I've seen men and women desperate to set their lives right. They showed humility. They showed respect. And then I see people like you. You come in here, dressed in clothes that suggest you think you're above all this, with a look on your face that dares me to hold you accountable." He finally flipped open the file, his eyes scanning for ammunition. Failure to appear for a public intoxication charge. Before that, a series of unpaid traffic violations. It's a pattern, you see. A pattern of defiance. It's a middle finger to the law. The actual file for Shanice Williams, a 22-year-old single mother, told a different story. She'd missed her court date because she couldn't get the day off work without being fired. But Judge Thompson didn't see any of that. He saw a caricature he could unload on. Keisha's lips parted slightly, as if to speak. "Do not interrupt me," the judge thundered, his face flushing red. "You will remain silent until I am finished." He stood up and leaned over the bench. People in this country cry about injustice. They march and shout about a broken system. But the system isn't what's broken. It's the people. It's the personal responsibility that's broken. And this courtroom, Ms. Williams, is where the consequences you've been running from finally catch up. He paced the length of the bench, a lion in his cage. Your failure to appear is not a logistical error. It is a philosophical statement. It says, I am beyond the reach of the law. Well, I am here to tell you today, in no uncertain terms, that you are not. He stopped and stared directly at her, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I have a choice. I can follow the milquetoast recommendations in this file, a slap on the wrist. Or I can do my job. I can send a message. A message to you, and to anyone else who thinks the justice system is a joke. The courtroom was deathly quiet. I see no mitigating factors, Judge Thompson said, his voice hard as granite. I see a history of contempt, and a defendant before me who has only offered the silent insolence of her posture. Your file shows you are unemployed. It shows a lack of stable housing. He was inventing details now, projecting them onto Keisha based on his assumptions. You are, by all accounts, a drain on the very society whose rules you so gleefully flout. This stops today, he said, returning to his seat. He picked up the gavel. This is where the cycle of disrespect ends. The air in the courtroom felt brittle. Judge Thompson held the gavel aloft, ready for his grand finale. The target of his tirade, Keisha Hayes, hadn't moved a muscle. Her calm was a mirror, and the judge, staring into it, only saw a reflection of his own escalating rage. The recommendation from the public defender's office, the judge sneered, suggests a fine and a class. This court believes that some maladies are beyond therapy. Some require surgery. A sharp, clean cut to excise the disease of contempt. He tossed the file onto the bench. The law-abiding citizens who show up for jury duty and pay their fines deserve to know that the law has teeth. They deserve to know that the system protects them, not those who mock it. He looked directly at Keisha, his eyes cold. He was no longer seeing a person. He was seeing an idea of disorder that he was appointed to correct. Therefore, on the charge of failure to appear, he paused for dramatic effect. This court rejects the lenient recommendations of the defense. I am sentencing you, he declared, his voice booming, to the maximum sentence allowed under the statute for this offense. 90 days in the county jail. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Ben Carter, the public defender, shot to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief. Your Honor. 90 days? For a failure to appear on a misdemeanor? That's unheard of. It's grossly disproportionate. It is entirely appropriate, Mr. Carter. Thompson shot back. Objection noted and overruled. He then delivered the final blow. And there will be no bail pending appeal. The sentence is effective immediately. He raised the gavel high. Madam Bailiff, take the defendant into custody. He brought the gavel down with a deafening crack. The bailiff, a middle-aged woman named Brenda, hesitated. Her gut screamed that something was profoundly wrong. She took a reluctant step toward Keisha. Ben Carter was frantically whispering to the assistant DA, who looked equally horrified. Keisha Hayes finally moved. She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting the bailiff's. She gave a slow, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It wasn't a plea. It was an instruction. And just as the bailiff was about to take another step, a new voice cut through the tension, sharp and radiating an authority that eclipsed even the judges. Stop. Section 4, the reveal. The voice came from the back of the courtroom. Every head swiveled. Striding down the aisle was a tall man in a perfectly tailored gray suit. It was Alastair Finch, the district attorney for the entire county. Judge Thompson was visibly irritated by the intrusion. Mr. Finch, the judge snapped. To what do we owe the honor? I am in the middle of business. Finch didn't stop until he reached the bar. He didn't look at the judge. His eyes were locked on the bailiff. Bailiff, Finch said, his voice calm but steely. Stand down. Step away from Miss Hayes. It was an order. The bailiff, caught between two centers of power, instinctively obeyed. Judge Thompson was now incandescent with rage. Mr. Finch, how dare you? This is my courtroom. That woman is a sentenced defendant. Alastair Finch finally turned his head and met the judge's furious gaze. There was no anger in his expression, only a profound, weary disappointment. Your Honor, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. What, exactly, are you doing? I am doing my job. Thompson roared. I have just sentenced a recalcitrant defendant, Shanice Williams, for her contempt of this court. Finch held the judge's gaze for a long moment. Then he said the words that would bring Judge Thompson's world crashing down. Your Honor, he said, enunciating each word with surgical precision. The woman you have just sentenced to 90 days in jail is not Shanice Williams. A confused murmur spread through the room. What nonsense is this? The judge sputtered. Ben Carter, the public defender, shook his head. Your Honor, I tried to tell you. That is not my client. Then who in God's name is she? The judge demanded, his eyes darting to Keisha, as if seeing her for the first time. Alastair Finch took a deep breath. Your Honor, he said, his voice now ringing with the full weight of his office. You have just illegally sentenced and attempted to incarcerate Ms. Keisha Hayes. She is a graduate of Yale Law School, a former prosecutor for the Department of Justice, and as of 2 weeks ago, she is the new lead prosecutor for the Special Prosecutions Division. The words hung in the air, each one a hammer blow. But Finch wasn't finished. Ms. Hayes was present in your courtroom this afternoon in her official capacity. She was here as an observer for the district attorney's new sentencing review initiative. An initiative, I might add, Finch concluded, letting the words land with the force of a battering ram, that she is heading. Section 5, the silence. Then it came. The silence. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a physical presence, rushing in to fill the vacuum, thick and heavy like water. It was the sound of a career ending. The sound of a man's entire worldview collapsing in on him. Judge Howard Thompson went silent. His mouth remained agape. The furious color drained from his face, leaving a waxy, pallid gray. His eyes, wide and unblinking, were fixed on Keisha Hayes. And in that moment, he truly saw her. He didn't see a defiant defendant named Shanice Williams. He saw a sharp, powerful woman in a tailored suit. He saw her Yale degree. He saw her title, lead prosecutor. And most terrifyingly, he saw her as the head of the Sentencing Review Initiative, a program with the power to scrutinize every single sentence he had ever handed down. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had personally handed the sword to his own executioner. In that silence, every biased assumption, every lazy stereotype, every ounce of his petty tyranny was laid bare. He had performed his prejudice on a brightly lit stage, only now realizing his audience included the one person he should have feared most. Finally, after an eternity, Keisha Hayes spoke. Her voice was quiet, controlled, and utterly devastating. Thank you for the demonstration, Your Honor, she said. It was illuminating. With that, she reclaimed all the power he had tried to strip from her. What everyone witnessed was a rare, naked glimpse into the machinery that produces injustice every day. Judge Thompson's assumptions about Keisha are woven into the very fabric of the justice system. The data is undeniable. A 2023 report from the United States Sentencing Commission, for instance, found that black men received sentences that were, on average, 13.4% longer than those given to white men for the exact same crimes. Think about that. For the same crime, the color of a man's skin could add more than a tenth of his life onto his time behind bars. And the disparities persist across gender. The same report found that black and Hispanic females were significantly less likely to receive a sentence of probation when compared to white females. Judge Thompson's reflexive decision to order jail time wasn't an aberration, it was a statistic brought to life. This bias is a cumulative poison. It starts with policing patterns, continues with prosecutorial decisions, and culminates in the courtroom, where a judge's personal feelings and implicit biases can become a weapon. Research shows these disparities are often most pronounced for lower-level crimes. Like the fictional Shanice Williams's failure to appear, where a judge's discretion has more room to operate. Judge Thompson didn't just sentence a woman he misidentified, he sentenced her through a distorted lens of prejudice that infects courtrooms across the nation. Section 6, the aftermath and consequences. The silence was finally broken by the judge himself. He made a strange, guttural noise and, without another word, turned and practically fled the bench, disappearing into his chambers. The aftermath was swift. District Attorney Alastair Finch immediately filed a formal complaint with the state's Commission on Judicial Conduct. With multiple witnesses, the incident was impossible to deny. Within a week, the formal process to remove Judge Howard Thompson from the bench began, and he was placed on administrative suspension. His long career was, for all intents and purposes, over. A few days later, the actual Shanice Williams appeared before a different judge. The new judge read the file, listened to the public defender, and issued the originally recommended sentence, a $100 fine and 2 online alcohol awareness classes. The proceeding took less than 10 minutes. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. For Shanice, the system delivered a minor penalty. For Keisha, in the very same spot, the system had tried to swallow her whole. But this story isn't about one biased judge. It's about the rise of a new kind of justice. Keisha Hayes didn't celebrate. For her, the incident was undeniable evidence. It was the perfect, explosive case study to launch her sentencing review initiative. When she made her presentation to the state bar a month later, she didn't just present charts. She told her story. For a few moments, she told the stunned room, "I was Shanice Williams. And I felt the full, crushing weight of a system that can judge you not on facts, but on the color of your skin." The question is not whether bias exists. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Her initiative, which had faced quiet resistance, was suddenly unstoppable. It was modeled on the Second Look movement, a wave of reform gaining traction in the U.S. These laws recognize that many harsh sentences from past decades don't serve justice or public safety today, empowering courts to review sentences after a person has served significant time. While a growing number of states have adopted these laws, they still face political and legal resistance in many areas. Keisha's program was now a powerhouse for reform, built to find the real Shanice Williamses of the world and give them a second chance. This story, while fictional, forces us to confront a difficult reality that plays out in less visible ways every day. It leaves us with a tough question: how many times does this happen when the person in the defendant's box isn't a lead prosecutor with the power to fight back?